All right, let's go ahead and get started because now we're starting a little bit late. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. Apologies for the tech issues, but we'll make sure we add a little bit of time at the end to make sure we fit in all the content tonight. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Courage California tonight for our California Democratic Party Chair Candidate Forum. I'm Irene Gao. I'm the Executive Director of Courage. Courage California's mission is to provide the tools needed to unite with communities organizing for progressive change, expose the forces of corruption, and hold our representatives to account in order to ensure that California's elected officials act with courage. We have 1.4 million members across California and the nation, and I'm excited many of you guys are here today. I'll be hosting this forum with my colleague, Raquel Parra, our Policy and Partnerships Manager. ASL interpretation is being provided tonight by Mark Armita and Dresden Lamar from Pro Bono ASL. Before we get into the program, I'd like to do a quick land acknowledgement. Courage California acknowledges our presence on the traditional and unceded territory of hundreds of First Nations who are the traditional caretakers of this land we call California. As visitors on this land, we pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, relatives, and future generations. I know that you're all looking forward to hearing from Rusty Hicks and Delaine Easton and their visions for the future of the party here in California. This is the kind of election that generates a lot of opinions. So I ask that everyone be respectful to each other and our candidates, especially in the chat this evening. My colleagues are going to be putting a community agreement in the chat that I ask everyone to review. So as you all know, California is a big state and almost half of the 22 million voters in the state are registered as Democrats. Democrats hold both federal Senate seats, an overwhelming majority of our state representatives, all statewide constitutional offices, and a supermajority in the state legislature. As a state, we are facing a complex set of threats and opportunities, including an equitable and just COVID recovery, a widening health gap, a widening wealth gap, a gubernatorial recall, and an increasingly diverse electorate. And today's forum is a chance for you all to hear from and engage with two candidates for a powerful position that will influence how the Democratic Party in California leads and responds to these key issues. So we want to know tonight as we head into this forum, what is the top issue that you want to see the California Democratic Party prioritize this year in 2021? So we just launched a poll that should have appeared on your screen. So choose, I know it's hard to choose one. There are a lot of things going on, but we do ask that you choose one of these issues as part of the poll. So we'll just give you a few minutes to choose from that. As you can see, it's a pretty, not comprehensive list, but a pretty full list. In the meantime, I'll do a quick rundown of how the next hour and a half are gonna go. So each candidate is gonna have about 5 minutes to address the audience up at the top. Raquel and I will then ask questions for about 30 minutes. And then our Courage colleagues will ask questions from the audience for 20 minutes. And those are gonna be questions that you all either submitted as part of the RSVP process, or you can also submit them in the Q&A section on your Zoom. So as you type in your question on the Zoom, please also designate who the question should be addressed to, and we'll try to get to as many as we can tonight. All right, so let's take a look at the results of the poll to just see what folks are sort of. All right, so it looks like top one ended up being racial justice and equity, with close from healthcare, economic equity, housing, and homelessness. Great, thank you everyone. And of course, we want to acknowledge that, of course, all of these issues are deeply related, with racial justice and equity in particular being one that underscores many of these other issues. So thanks for participating in the poll. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Raquel to give a quick overview of the party chair election process. Raquel?
Thank you, Irene. Good evening, everyone. As Irene mentioned, the party chair position is a powerful one in our state. Chairs are elected every 4 years by party delegates, 1/3 of which are elected officials, 1/3 of which are people appointed by elected officials, and 1/3 of which are people directly elected by registered party voters in a process known as ADEMS, Assembly District Election Meetings. Courage and many of our partners here were part of driving a historic turnout for the ADEMS election this year. It was, the most people we've had in this election, vote in this election. I think since ADEMS has started, and I hope that all of you on today voted in that election. All of the party delegates should represent each of you in their role as delegates. So for those of you who are not delegates, I encourage you to find out who your delegates are as designated by your assembly district. And if you need help with that, always feel free to reach out to us at info@couragecampaign.org. Now, I would like to see how many folks who have joined us today are delegates themselves. And as folks are filling this out, I'm gonna let y'all know, like, this year the party chair election will take place during the upcoming virtual convention that's from April 29th to May 2nd. And I think we have, looks like, the majority of folks, and if we can get the poll results up. All right, so it looks like we have some delegates in the house. Thank you all for joining. Before we hear from Rusty and Delaine, I want to remind you that you can submit your questions to the candidates at any time by typing them in the Zoom Q&A section. So please let us know who to address the question to, unless the question should go to both candidates. With that, I'll turn it back to Irene to introduce the candidates.
Thank you, Raquel. So I'd now like to welcome Rusty Hicks and Delaine Easton. So let me give a quick introduction before I have them speak to each of you tonight. Rusty Hicks was elected to serve as chair of the California Democratic Party in June 2019. In 2020, he oversaw the execution of a strategic grassroots organizing campaign to engage more than 10 million California Democrats and invested in the party's communications, fundraising, and operational infrastructure to support Democrats throughout the state. Prior to his election as chair, Rusty served as both president and political director of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, representing 300 local unions and 800,000 members. He helped lead a successful campaign to raise the wages of nearly 1 million working Angelinos to $15 an hour and passed a progressive ballot measure to build more affordable housing and create good union jobs. Rusty also built a program to help formerly incarcerated workers rejoin the workforce and secure a good union job. In 2008, Rusty served as the California political director for Obama for America. Early in his career, he served as the district director for Congressmember Ted Lieu, as well as in the office of the late Assemblymember Mike Gordon. Rusty is a veteran of the United States Navy and deployed to Afghanistan in 2012 to 2013 in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. He is a graduate of Loyola Law School. Rusty lives in Pasadena. Delaine Easton is the former two-term California State Superintendent of Public Instruction. She was elected superintendent following 8 years in the State Assembly and 6 years on the Union City City Council. Born in San Diego and raised in San Francisco and San Carlos, Delaine attended UC Davis and UC Santa Barbara. She taught at several community colleges and worked at Pacific Telesis Group until she won election to the Assembly. As a state legislator, Delaine authored and passed bills across issues ranging from the environment to highway funding to education. During her time as a legislator, she received numerous awards from a variety of diverse groups. In 1995, Delaine was elected to serve the first of her 2 terms as State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The only woman to date to hold this office, Delaine championed wiring schools for technology and stronger technical and vocational training for students. After leaving elected office, Delaine became the first executive director of the National Institute for School Leadership and distinguished visiting professor of educational leadership at Mills College, where she directed the Center for Civic Engagement and Women's Leadership. She has served or serves on a number of boards advocating for foster youth, women's rights, healthy lunches, civic engagement of youth, gardens in schools, electing more women to public office, and getting more women into STEM education. She served on the Gervitz School of Education Board at UCSB and the Alumni Board at UC Davis, as well as chairing the UC Davis Center for Nutrition Education Board. Delaine resides in Davis. Thank you, Rusty and Delaine, both of you, for joining us tonight. You'll now each get 5 minutes to address our audience before Raquel and I ask a few questions. So Rusty, if you'd like to go first, you have the first 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Irene, and thank you to Courage for hosting this this conversation. It's great to be with all of you and to continue the conversation, the partnership between Courage and the California Democratic Party. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve in this role since June of 2019, which has been an incredibly challenging time in our state and in our nation. But I come to this work as an organizer, having served in the labor movement in Los Angeles, where, as was mentioned in the bio, the opportunity to raise the wages of nearly 1 million workers to $15 an hour. Many folks, like my own grandparents and my mother, who never had the opportunity of the benefit of a union, to have a collective voice on the job, to be a part of that campaign and lift the wages of workers just like them, obviously was incredibly important to me. And the program to create good union jobs in the construction trades for folks like my own father, who I did not have the opportunity to meet until I was 11 years old, and he was in a Texas prison. He served the vast majority of my upbringing, was locked up, and when he got out, he never could quite get a break. And so that was an experience that I carried with me in developing that program that today supports nearly 200 formerly incarcerated folks that are on a construction site in a good quality union job. It's that organizer's mindset that I've brought to this job, not only to stabilize the largest state party in the country, but to quickly turn to the work of the most important election of our lifetimes, obviously getting rid of the previous occupant in the White House. And we're seeing what the importance of our work, what it really means to today. But I think it lays a foundation for the work that we do going forward. Obviously, we have some incredibly important political fights in front of us, not the least of which is defeating a Republican recall of our governor, an attempt by Republicans to do an end run around the barrier they can't seem to overcome, which is winning statewide election in California, but also ensuring that we take advantage of the opportunities that redistricting bring us and being able to face the challenges that it throws our way as well. I believe those incredible political fights, we are well positioned for those headed into the latter half of 2021 and 2022. But at the same time, I think we've also got to ensure that we're investing in the long-term success, the long-term future of our party, not the least of which is ensuring that we are organizing as hard after Election Day as we organize before Election Day. We've gotten pretty good about electing Democrats in California. We've not been as good about implementing important policies in our incredibly progressive platform, whether it was Medicare for All or CalCare AB 1400, where there was a Green New Deal for California, whether it was building more affordable housing, creating good jobs, ensuring that we were fully meeting the housing needs of 40 million Californians. We've got to invest in our party's infrastructure the way we invest around election time. We've got to invest in that organizing work around important policy, legislative, and issue advocacy campaigns as well. We've got to continue to invest in our party's communications, being able to tell our story in a new and different way in red, blue, and purple parts of the state, especially as our state is becoming even more diverse. We've got to invest in the recruitment and training of the next generation of grassroots leaders and public servants. Democrats won 53% of all the local government seats that were up for grabs in 2020, November of 2020. We've got to double down on that in the future. And growing our small dollar donor network within the party. We've significantly expanded our small dollar donor network. We need to double down on that into the future. And lastly is ensuring that we continue the culture change that we started in mid-2019. A party where every person is seen and every voice is heard, every Democrat has a seat at the tables where decisions are really made. I've been proud of the work that we've been able to do. I recognize there's a lot more to do. We'll talk about some of that this evening, but I'm working hard to earn the opportunity to continue to do it, and I'd be grateful to have your support. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Rusty. And now I'd like to turn it over for the next 5 minutes to Delaine Easton. Delaine?
Well, good evening, and thank you all so much for the opportunity to join you tonight. I'm a fifth generation Californian on my mom's side. I'm from a union family, the daughter of a dress clerk and a Navy veteran machinist who was the shop steward. My grandfather was a teamster back when they drove teams of horses, and I joined the California Federation of Teachers when I was a community college professor. I owe the opportunities I've had to my parents, yes, but also to the public education I was privileged to receive in California, from elementary through graduate school. My formative experiences as an adult were aided by the Democratic Party and my time in public service, and I want to give back to the party, help elect more Democrats, and work hard to build a better party we can all be proud of. You may know me as the only woman ever elected state superintendent of public instruction, where I managed a workforce of more than 3,300 staff at our Department of Education. I was responsible for over 42% of the California state budget, and I oversaw public education of more than 6 million California students for each of 8 years. I was elected to the state assembly for 4 terms before that and 2 terms as a city council member. I am the only candidate in the race who's won election to public office, and that matters in the role of party chair, where knowing how to run and win races is important. Of course, I don't just know how to win races. I'm an organizer, and you have to be to win in a state as big and complex as California. I'm running to become chair of the California Democratic Party because we can and we must do better. Last November, I was very concerned that even in the face of the big win for Biden-Harris, we suffered major losses in targeted congressional seats and key state propositions. In the midst of that, engaged Democrats reached out to me and asked me to consider running to lead the party. I'm also very concerned in general for the party. I have friends whose children are not registering as Democrats because they don't know what we stand for. I have friends leaving the party for similar reasons. I have talked to people who became engaged as delegates and then saw the culture of favoritism and intimidation within our party and did not run again. Some are disenchanted because they do not see us as aggressively championing the issues we profess to care about, be it Medicare for all, education, or the environment. We say we will fight to pass legislation to forgive student debt, yet year after year after year, those issues show little progress. We must never forget we are the party of, by, and for the working class. And the legislation we pass as the donors who support us should reflect that. We must make sure our elected representatives are champions for critical legislation like CalCare and the Green New Deal, and that they represent our party platform. So my top priorities are including organizing to defeat the recall, should it qualify, winning back the seats we lost and more, implementing better systems for our internal elections and appointments, democratizing the party, increasing diversity, and committing to campaign finance reform. My inclusive, proven leadership style and my history of making transformational changes is why I have the statewide party endorsements of CDP Chicano Latino Caucus, CDP Progressive Caucus Chair, Amar Shergill, CDP Black Caucus Chair, Taisha Brown, CDP Environmental Caucus Chair, R.L. Miller, CYD Black Caucus Chair, Devin Murphy, and elected officials and delegates from up and down the state. We need to establish better policies with regard to preventing corporate influence, particularly from companies that are contrary to our values. The California Democratic Party and our candidates must reject contributions from donors associated with fossil fuel companies, private prisons, and other entities that undermine working class communities and our democratic values. So I look forward to answering your questions, discussing my priorities, and telling you why, after 36 years, we are overdue to elect a woman to chair the California Democratic Party, especially the one who is the most qualified candidate. Thank you.
Thank you, Delaine. So now Raquel and I are going to give you both a few questions. And given that we want to leave some time at the end to also ask questions that came in from our members and from participants here tonight, we ask you to keep your answers to 2 minutes each. and to try to address the question as directly as possible. For participants, I want to remind you all that you can submit questions to ask the candidates using the Zoom Q&A function on your screen, and then encourage staff will ask some of the questions during that part of the forum tonight. And we will try to read the name of the first person who submits the question. If you'd like to stay anonymous, please also let us know. All right, so let's get started with our first question, because we want to, of course, cover tonight. The first question for tonight: what are the top priorities the party should stand and fight for an equitable and just recovery from the COVID pandemic? And Delaine, I'm going to send that first question over to you for the first couple minutes.
Well, thank you for that. One of the big important things to notice is that a lot of people have been given a little break from some of the rent pressures, and those are stopping now. And we're going to see a lot of people that are past due with rents going back several months. And we're going to have to really work hard to make sure that we keep the housing market stable and that we don't kick a bunch of people out on the street, especially low-income people. We also know that COVID has pointed out that and some people are unaware of this. There are a bunch of people that were sent home to do distance learning, a bunch of students, except they couldn't do distance learning. 30% of the children in Los Angeles Unified do not have access to a computer at home. Those kids were sent home to nothing. And all over rural and remote parts of California, there are big gaps in broadband. Those kids didn't get services either. So the fact is that, if anything, COVID-19 points out the need to ramp up our efforts in terms of housing and the need to provide broadband to every single person in the state of California. Because in fact, while some districts were able to give some of their students access, there were many districts that did not do that. And I just will tell you, in the future, we also have to worry about having access to vaccines, even though our governor has done the best job in America, but we still have a lot more people to get vaccinated. We need to keep going.
Thank you, Delaine. Rusty, you also have 2 minutes to answer that question as well.
Well, thank you. I think an equitable recovery starts with ensuring that those communities that have borne the brunt of this global pandemic are the first to get the tools needed to protect themselves from a future spread of the coronavirus. Obviously, the governor has, as was noted, has done a remarkable job at directing vaccines towards the hardest hit communities, but certainly we need to double down on the work that's been done there. Two, with regards to school reopening, we have to ensure that distance learning might have worked for some. It certainly hasn't worked for everyone. And while addressing broadband issues is something that we certainly should prioritize, I believe getting our children back into a traditional learning environment as quickly as possible and doing so safely gives us the best opportunity for success, especially when those that are cannot stay home to work are actually having to go into work. Obviously, having their children in a classroom is a double benefit, not only for the child, but also for the family as well. And then lastly is just the economic benefit of getting small businesses in particular supported and back on track, because they do provide the greatest number of jobs, and especially in communities of color, especially for women, especially for younger workers as well. Small businesses really are the backbone of that support. And so we need to find ways to support them as well.
Thank you. So the next question is, what do you see as the major barriers to getting more progressive policies in the state? And I will kick to you, Rusty, for your 2 minutes on this question.
Well, in many ways, I think that we have gotten, I'll speak as a party, we've gotten good at developing great resolutions and a progressive platform and great pronouncements and statements. We've gotten good about recruiting, supporting, and helping to elect Democrats to public office at the state, federal, and local levels. Oftentimes, and too often, we say, well, we've done our job. We put forward the policy and we help to elect the elected official. And in my view, that's only half of our job. The power of progressive policies, the power, frankly, of the Democratic Party is in 10 million Democrats across the state. It's incumbent upon us to organize as hard after Election Day as we organize before Election Day. It's incumbent upon us to put in place the same infrastructure to pass progressive policies as we do to elect Democrats. I believe that when we organize 10 million Democrats across the state, we ultimately are able to push elected officials to do the right thing, to protect them when they do, and ultimately hold them accountable when they don't. Otherwise, it's the only way to ultimately enforce the contract. If you view the progressive platform as the contract and the elected official is on the other side of the table, it's important that you bring as much power to bear to ensure that we honor that contract. That's why I have called for standing up a statewide organizing operation on a year-round basis to do exactly that.
Delaine?
Well, thank you. I really do believe that there are a lot of people who do tell us exactly what we want to hear, what's in our platform, and then they go to Sacramento and get amnesia. They don't step up and do the work that is required to do things like the Green New Deal. Why are we fracking in California? Is there anybody on this call that can explain that to me? We've got the majorities in both houses, and fracking is evil. They didn't have earthquakes in Oklahoma until they started fracking. We had them before they were fashionable. So it's time for us to put our foot down with a firm hand and do much more in the way of the clean energy that we can and should be using. You know, there are steam access points in California that aren't being used, and there's a great opportunity to do much more in the way of wind turbines and much more in the way of solar. And we need to, in fact, be much more nimble about pushing for that. And we've got to stop letting people say that they're running on the Democratic platform and then get to Sacramento and just get complete amnesia and stop fighting for those things, slipping back to the right. And so I say to each of you, it's also time for the party to get more engaged and involved in local elections, because that's where we build our bench. That's where people really learn the skills that they will need if they're going to be successful in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C. They need to be in local government, and we need to stand for these values. Even in red parts of the state, things are changing. People are moving in record numbers. They're moving out of the more expensive part of our state, and a lot of them are people that are our people. They're blue as can be, and they can change the culture and the trajectory of decisions for all of us if we get them there and we support them. But it means the party's got to stand tall and demand that people do what they said they were going to do when they get to Sacramento or to Washington.
Great, thank you both. So the next question is something that both of you addressed in each of your openings. So with a recall, which looks like is poised to qualify for the ballot this month, what should the Democratic Party strategy be to defeat it? And Delaine, if you can go first with that question.
Thank you. I really do believe that this governor has done absolutely nothing for which he should be recalled. Right now, California is behind 4 nations in terms of the percentage of people we've had vaccinated. We are #1 state in the union in terms of getting vaccinations out there and doing better than a lot of countries are doing. And so it's a false, and oh, by the way, a bunch of the people that are criticizing the governor because of the failure to get enough people vaccinated are also accepting money from the anti-vaxxers to defeat the governor. Somewhere in the Old Testament, it says hypocrisy is the worst sin. And this is hypocrisy. On the one hand, criticizing the governor for not getting enough vaccinations when he is, and on the other hand, having a bunch of anti-vaxxers pushing the recall. So Republicans have figured out they can't win unless it's in a recall. They can't win a straight up election anymore. There aren't enough Republicans in California to do that. And so they're trying to get in the back door, which is what they did when Arnold Schwarzenegger defeated Gray Davis. So we got to stand with Gavin, and we got to stand tall, and we've all got to raise our voices. But we got to be careful of not doing, inappropriate things. Comparing what's happening with our governor with what happened back in Washington, D.C. with that terrible overtaking of the Capitol. That's not a fair comparison, and no less than the LA Times took the chair out when he tried to draw that parallel. So we got to be careful. We got to do it right, but we got to stand with our governor, and we got to defeat the recall, and we got to defeat it soundly by speaking out everywhere we can.
Thank you, Delaine. And Rusty, the same question goes to you on the Democratic strategy to respond to the recall.
Well, I think there's the latest numbers that we saw from the PPIC poll show what this is really about. 80% of Republicans support the recall. 80% of Democrats oppose the recall. And no party preference voters are sort of mixed, with opposing the recall taking the lead. We also have a governor that's relatively popular at 53% approval rating, and Democrats have a 22-point majority in the state. So this campaign, should it qualify, is really about three things. One, sharing the story of the good work the governor has done before the pandemic, the strength of his reforms to defeat, addressing systemic racism in California, whether it was on healthcare or housing or addressing issues of income inequality. We've got to tell that story. Two, we talk about the work the governor has done to equitably distribute vaccinations, ensuring that we get our schools reopened, that we get our economy back on track. And third is to remind people who started this, a bunch of far right-wing extremists, and who has embraced this, which is not only the state Republican Party, but the national Republican Party, who see this as the first step in the 2022 midterms. So all eyes will be on, the political world will be focused on California in the fall of 2021. The California Democratic Party has already started. The governor opened his campaign just a bit ago. We sent over the first check, matching what national Republicans did to oppose the recall and get that campaign started. We are getting county committees and Democratic clubs to pass resolutions opposing the recall. We're lining up local elected officials. We're engaged in text banking and pledge signing to get our folks organized to oppose the recall. It's about unifying and pushing back.
So the next question is, corporations have an outsized influence in our politics, as we saw in our general election, both in candidate and proposition races. So what is your approach to the role of corporations in the party? And do you take corporate contributions to your campaign? And we'll start with Rusty for this one.
Well, for my personal campaign, either in 2019 and in 2021, it's been funded by local unions, great folks like NUHW, who I'm proud to say are supporting my campaign, and individuals. That was the case in 2019. That's the case in 2021. For our party, we established a process by which we would divest from contributions from folks we didn't want to have making contributions to the party. Historically, the party has had three primary industries that we didn't take contributions from: oil, gun manufacturers, and the tobacco industry. Through that process that we established in the last 12 months, we added 4 additional industries: for-profit prisons, for-profit colleges, for-profit healthcare, and the payday loan industry. And we have a process that we would revisit every 2 years to expand that list, to divest from corporate contributions as quickly as possible. In order to speed that, we've also invested in the small dollar donor infrastructure of the party, growing the network as large as it's ever been. Historically, only 5% of the party's revenue comes from small dollar donor contributions. We've both doubled the size of the budget and grown that to 15%. raising more than $2 million in 2020 alone in the middle of a global pandemic. And we're on track for 20% in 2021 and 2022. My hope is over the course of the next 4 years to be at or near 50% of the revenue we bring in is from small dollar donor contributions. I think that we have a process by which we can divest from those contributions we don't want within our party. And two, growing the small dollar donor network to as large as it possibly can be in order to speed that divestment.
Delaine, same question to you.
Sorry. I apologize. Let me just say to all of you, I do not believe that we should be taking corporate contributions, and I'm not taking corporate contributions. I actually do believe that the party didn't just say they wouldn't take money from fossil fuel oil companies. They said from fossil fuel companies, period. That's oil and gas. The chair signed a promise that he would not take that money, and then he took $330,000 from Sepra Gas. $330,000 in violation of a commitment that was made to the membership of this party. Sierra Club has called him out on it. And so no less than the Sierra Club has made the point that this was not appropriate. I will say to each and every one of you, there does need to be a much more nimble effort made to raise money from small donors from around the state. But that will be easier and better if what we do is to stay true to our word, to stay faithful to our efforts to stay away from people like the gun manufacturers and the tobacco industry. And that shouldn't be include showing ads about vaping at the convention, which happened last time we had a convention. Bottom line is our party needs to be absolutely on the side of the angels. We need to stay with those issues that do in fact resonate with the people in the California Democratic Party. And those people tend to be people that care about the future, not just of the republic, but of the future of the world. And we have some very dangerous enterprises out there that are trying to trick us into supporting their efforts by selling us ads and hoping that we'll continue to go along and not do things like ban fracking. It's disgraceful that oil and gas continues to have as much of a foothold in California. There are still 2 plants that use hydrofluoric acid down in Southern California that exist in the state of California that should not be here. And they should be either change their way of producing oil or they should get out of the business.
Thank you, Delaine. Thank you, Rusty. I have a quick follow-up question because this is of particular concern to Courage California. As you know, we run our annual Courage score. And as part of that, we track how legislators vote. And this year in particular, we'll be highlighting how some of those votes are potentially tied to corporate contributions that come in through candidates that don't necessarily come in through the party. So my follow-up question is, while it's easy for potentially the party to have a platform and come out against specific corporate contributions, what do you sort of see as the next steps in ensuring that the party representatives, so at the local level, state level, federal level, also follow suit in rejecting those same sorts of corporate contributions as well? Delaine?
I think we need campaign finance reform so that people do not have to spend big money to get their story out, to state their position on the various issues that are out there. We ought to be encouraging real debates where people have to hold their own against their opponents and where they're given enough time that they can really respond to the issues as they're brought forward and not rely on these 30-second ads that are just flash and dash. And really going forward, the state of California needs to do a lot more to ensure that elections are not about who has the most money, that's the one who wins, but who in fact has the best ideas and has the best backbone to get those ideas done. And right now, we have to worry that there is too much influence based on who has the most money in elections generally in our country, but certainly in the most expensive state in the union, California.
Thank you. Rusty, I'll give you a couple of minutes to respond to that question as well.
Well, I would say that raising individual contributions, moving away from corporate contributions, I believe is significantly easier if you're an individual versus an organization. Folks like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Katie Porter have an easier time in raising small dollar donor contributions, especially if the infrastructure isn't there for that organization, than an organization. Therefore, what I am trying to do with our party is actually have a process by which we can divest as quickly as possible and invest in the small dollar donor infrastructure that actually shows, that proves that it can be done. So if an organization can do it, an elected official, a candidate can do it. With regards to the endorsement process, certainly I think that our grassroots leaders, which are the closest to the ground on state and federal races, which we make endorsements in, provide those recommendations to the state party. And so in places where you have candidates that are taking contributions that are not in line with the values of the party, then it's, grassroots leaders are empowered to simply not endorse them, to not support them for public office. Our endorsement process is not made, endorsements aren't made by the chair and they're not made by the executive board of the party. They're made by grassroots leaders within those specific districts. And I think that's the way it should be.
Thank you. So Raquel and I have two more questions. My next question is going to be, how do you plan on broadening the base of the party, and which communities in particular are priorities and why? And Rusty, if you could answer that one first.
Sure. Well, I know there's been much talk of the demise of the Democratic Party and how everyone is fleeing the Democratic Party, but that didn't actually prove itself out in fact. The party has grown by more than 2 million members over the last 2 years alone, faster than any other political party, nearly triple that of no party preference voters. It's at a high water mark over the last 25 years with a little over 46% of the total vote in California. And so that diversification of California voters is happening within the Democratic Party faster than any other category of voters. I've been really proud that we've engaged a diverse set of voters in connection with our campaigns. This year, historically, we would focus on moderately occasional voters in an attempt to turn them out. This year, we focused on new registrants, those that had never voted by mail, and those for whom English was a second language, and had targeted campaigns around each one of those categories to ensure that they were able to exercise their right to vote in an incredibly important election. 60% of those voters were under the age of 35. Just over 2/3 of them were from communities of color. And so I believe those are the kinds of programs that we need, not just in the election cycle, but on a year-round basis. Obviously the recall, while I'd prefer not to have a recall, it is an opportunity for us to stand up programming in the midst of an election cycle, but the opportunity to leave that programming in place, especially around Latino communities, Black communities, AAPI communities, especially when they have not only big impact in the election season, but really around the policies that we implement.
Thank you, Rusty. Delaine?
Well, I do want to acknowledge that we've, yes, gained some Democrats, and I want to thank Donald Trump for being such a clown that he really has helped us to build our bench. But the truth is we have to do even more as a party to invite people in, because even with the huge defeat of Donald Trump in California, we lost 1/3 of all the congressional seats that were lost in the nation here in California. 4 congressional seats were lost. And that was really unfortunate and disgraceful. So we have to do a better job of doing targeted messaging to our different communities. Our party has to do even more micro-targeting and using trusted messengers and getting more involved in local nonpartisan races, being respectful but at the same time being engaging. And we cannot, assume that we have the support of Latinx communities. We cannot assume we have support of African Americans or of Asian American Pacific Islanders. We must, in fact, have more targeted messaging that does, in fact, speak to the future of this state and our nation as it reflects on the diversity of who we are. And if we do that, we can build even a bigger bench, win even more seats, and of course, win some of the propositions that were lost tragically in November of last year. So we're doing some things that are working, but we can do even more and better. And especially with our younger potential Democratic members, we need to be much more authentic.
Thank you both. And so this will be the final question before we move into the Q&A portion. And this question is, what are your top 3 priorities for addressing the income and housing gaps in the state? So let's start with Rusty. Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
It's not a meeting until someone says you're on mute. I would say first and foremost, we have to reject this false choice that we're often presented with, that you can have affordable housing or you can have good jobs to construct that affordable housing. When I was in in Los Angeles County, we put forward a ballot measure that brought together affordable housing developers, tenants' rights advocates, and the building and construction trades to draft a measure that said to a developer, if you want a zoning change from the city, you've got to include affordable housing as part of the project, and you've got to get good quality jobs to the local workers that construct that project. The result was that when a developer got value by virtue of a zoning change, that the community got something for that. We got more affordable homes and we got good jobs at the same time. I think that's the win-win we have to find a way to put forward. I've been proud that we've put in place a renters council as a statewide chartered organization of the California Democratic Party, the opportunity to engage 18 million renters across California, and which can be, should be, and I believe will be a powerful force in California. And then obviously we've got to address the transition from a global pandemic and the impact that it's had with folks who haven't had any income or haven't had any jobs, to transition to what that looks like post pandemic. So rejecting a false choice, ensuring that we're organizing and making sure that we're making this transition in an equitable way.
Would you be so kind as to repeat the question?
Absolutely. What are your apologies. What are your top 3 priorities for addressing the income and housing gaps in the state?
Great. Well, first, the best solution to the income and housing gaps starts with investing in education. And that's from preschool all the way to college and all the way to career and technical education. The fact is, it's educating everyone that will in fact help everyone to have a job and to have a future. But in addition to that, we must build affordable housing as well as a diversity of housing. And we must understand that because of the new technology that's available, we need to wire the state so that people can live not just along the coast and not just in the most populous areas today, but all over the state in days to come. We must ensure that we have an opportunity for each and every person to have health care and not face the choice of either being able to make the house payment or going to see a doctor. I heard a young man on NPR the other day who had been working for 18 years and had not seen a doctor in 18 years because of the cost of health care. And so we've got to make housing and healthcare affordable. We've got to make education much better and stronger for everyone. And we've certainly got to make sure that everybody has a chance to do work and work with dignity. The fact is that as we go down this road, we also need to have a conversation about what we do to protect the housing of people from terrible rent spikes and from gouging on the part of greedy people. And so if we do have, yes, incentives for building housing, but also prevent people from taking advantage of people on limited incomes or seniors or people with disabilities, they have to still live with dignity. And we have to take that responsibility as a state to make sure that happens.
Thank you, Delaine and Rusty. So now I'm going to turn it over to a couple of our Courage staff who are going to ask some questions that came in from forum participants. And again, you'll have same format. You'll each have about 2 minutes to answer each question. And participants, I see we have about 20 minutes for this section. Sorry, future California. Well, current California. So I see a lot of opinions already popping in the chats, and I encourage you folks to continue to submit your questions in the Q&A section, and to also designate if your question is directed towards a specific candidate as well. So for the first question from participants, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jay. Jay?
So the first question comes from a Courage member, and we'll have Ms. Easton answer first, then we'll pass it over to Mr. Hicks. And the question is, what are some concrete steps you will take as chair to promote more racial equity in the party and the state, including in positions of leadership? Ms. Easton.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I will do is I will look at far and wide for diversity across this state. When I was superintendent of public instruction of the state of California, I had a fairly large department, and we had the most diverse leadership ever. I had many of the people who worked at the department come to me and tell me that they were very grateful to see a far more diverse set of bosses at the top rather than just the old school. And I reached out to various different school districts around the state and brought people in as visiting educators. And we had a very wonderful, talented group of people that helped to inspire the department. Not too many months ago, a woman stopped me on the street and said, you know, Delaine, I worked at the department for 34 years, but those 8 years you were there were the best 8 of my career because we were really on a mission. And that's what I want to do. I want to get a diverse group of talented people who will, in fact, have our California Democratic Party be a party on a mission, a party where we don't just pay lip service to the values we hold, but where we actually wear our heart on our sleeve and we work tirelessly day in and day out to get those things done, but done by the people that look like the people on this call.
Great, thank you. Now, Mr. Hicks.
Well, thank you for the question. I've been proud of the progress that we've made in this space, recognizing there's always more to do. When I was elected in June of 2019, I brought together a task force to look at how our committees should be composed and what they should look like. I implemented those recommendations that came from that task force. And today I'm proud to say that 54% are women, 60% delegates of color, 24% are under the age of 35. And our team is reflective of the same. We hired the first Latina executive director in the party's history. 68% of our staff are women, 74% are team members of color, and 58% are under the age of 35. I think going forward, the work that we do to ensure that it's not solely about who is sitting in what seat is to ensure that our party is moving forward as a truly anti-racist organization. that we fully understand what it means to be an anti-racist organization and how that work shows up in our systems and our structures and the beliefs and the work that we do. We've begun that work already in the fall of 2020 and in the first quarter of 2021 with conversations with our leaders and stakeholders, both inside the party and outside the party, a series of focus groups with voters during the election cycle, and a series of listening sessions with community groups, diverse community partners across the state. If elected, my hope is to put in place really a 6 to 9 month process by which we can move further down the road on the work of truly becoming an anti-racist organization.
All right, thanks so much to both of you. I have the next question here. This is an anonymous question. How would a model of more shared governance within the party look like? And we're going to go ahead and start with Rusty.
Well, I come out of the labor movement, so I have an appreciation for shared governance. It's been what systems I've worked through and with and under. I think there's greater opportunities for shared governance in the executive leadership team of the party, be it on committee appointments, budgetary oversight, programmatic direction, the political priorities that we have. At the same time, I think we also should talk about the structures that support that executive team, whether it's regional directors, their roles or responsibilities, what support they receive, the composition of standing committees and the work that they carry out and the support that they receive, as well as the role of caucuses and statewide charter organizations and ad hoc task forces within our party. I stepped into this role, in June of 2019, and I sought to ensure that we stabilized our party. That was the number one focus and the number one priority. My hope is that going forward, we have a leadership team that is all rowing in the same direction, because we'll get a lot further, a lot faster.
Thank you. And Delaine.
Well, I really do believe one of my first acts will be to create a task force made up of, yes, officers, but also a number of representatives from around our state to take a look at how we can open the leadership responsibilities at the top of the California Democratic Party, decentralize some of the chair's responsibilities, and make this more of a democratic party rather than a few people in the back room who are making a lot of the big decisions. I really do think that there's an amazing amount of talent, as you can see on this call, within our party, and that we can, in fact, review and reframe some of the ways that we're doing things such that people will feel much more inclusion, much more of a sense of their own engagement, and much less questioning of some of the decisions that come down, such that people really embrace and welcome and celebrate even the direction that the party goes, because we're all going there together, not just a few people leading the pack. So I really believe that this means that the party also needs to be more visible all over the state and not just in in the ivory tower.
Our next question is another pre-submitted question from a Courage member, and it is, what is your strategy to support candidates and bring in more voter support in swing and rural districts? Ms. Easton, we'll have you take this one first.
Well, I think we can and should do more to bring teams of training teams out into the rural areas and celebrate, together who we are as Democrats, and do some work to help some of the rural areas understand how they can make certain kinds of choices that aren't as expensive in terms of accounting and or legal choices, as well as how they can organize more effectively for the local races that will help them build the bench so they can, in fact, turn red areas purple and purple areas blue, and begin to really win a lot more seats up and down California. Again, in light of the changes that are occurring in population, I think Placer County gained 15% in population. That's amazing. And so let us be more nimble about helping them to position themselves for victories as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. The same question.
Well, I think we first have to recognize that a candidate does not win it on their own, that it does take an ecosystem for them to be successful, both before Election Day and after Election Day. I think the training that we do has to, yes, recruit and train quality candidates to run for and be appointed to public office. But I think we've also got to train campaign managers and organizers. We've got to support grassroots leaders that are running the organizations that support those campaigns and those candidates. And two, I think we have to invest in the infrastructure that actually supports those that are closest to the ground. County committees, Democratic clubs, grassroots organizations. We did that in 2020. We invested millions of dollars, providing ultimately all 58 counties as a result of the pandemic moving into the virtual environment. We provided them with tools like compliance call center technology and text banking technology, relational organizing tools and postcards and door hangers and letters and mail. We provided them with data that they could support not only state and federal candidates, but local candidates as well. The party actually invested directly into some battleground parts of the state. We supported Rhodesia Ransom in San Joaquin. We supported Carmen Ramirez in Ventura. We supported Katrina Foley in Orange County. I think the pandemic, while obviously a crisis for many or all of us, really forced us, was an opportunity to be forced to think about our work in a completely different way. And I think there will be a new semi-normal as to how we carry out this work that is going to be of great benefit to red and purple parts of the state going forward.
Thank you both. All right, so this next question is sort of a two-part. We have one, and then there was a member who also submitted a question. So the first part is, what is your position on AB 1400, the new single-payer bill introduced by Assemblymember Kalra? And the follow-up to that is from Gina Gates to both of you as well. Though the California Democratic Party has supported healthcare for all, the party has not done anything, for instance, walked, knocked, called, invested, or pushed electeds to support. Why? What are your thoughts? And if elected as chair, what will you do to push Medicare for all if you are supporting it? And we'll start with Delaine, please.
Sorry. I am a big supporter of Medicare for all. And I do like to remind people that when Franklin Roosevelt came up with Social Security, there were a bunch of hand-wringing whiners who said it would bankrupt America. And it saved America, saved a lot of seniors. A lot of us on this call have parents and grandparents and great-grandparents who benefited. Thank God for Franklin Roosevelt. Well, then we come along later and up comes Medicare, Lyndon Johnson. And they said the same stuff. It'll bankrupt the country. But it didn't bankrupt the country. And so now it's time for AB 1400 to pass, for this party to put its shoulder to the wheel and make sure that we do, in fact, give every person a chance to have medical insurance. There's so many things that are minor problems unless you don't get them treated. And then they become major life-threatening problems. I told you I heard on NPR, I'm a young man who hadn't been to a doctor in 18 years. That's just, and he's been working the whole time. But he has a wife and kids, and he couldn't afford to do it, he felt. So let us all be clear. Ounce prevention really is worth a pound of cure. And we do need to, in fact, the kind of preventive medicine that keeps us from getting much sicker and at a much higher rate. And that comes about when we look at what the rest of the first world does. This is not an insane idea. The French are not crazy. The Italians are not crazy. The Danish, the Swedes, the Norwegians are not crazy. They have the equivalent of AB 1400. And so let us do this now. we have the opportunity and we have absolutely the means, and it will, in fact, in the long run, save a lot of money if we do the right thing. But the party needs to step up and be counted.
Thank you. And to Rusty?
First I would say, yes, I support AB 1400, CalCare, Medicare for all, single payer, the preamble in the healthcare plank of our platform. The question is, what will we do to make it happen? And why hasn't the party done anything about it? Well, the party has historically been a financial vehicle to elect Democrats. It's not been about building power or passing progressive policies. We've gotten good at one, we need to get good at the other. I think how we do that is first and foremost defeat a Republican recall of our governor. I think that's the first step to ensure that we have a Democratic governor who can submit the waiver that we need in order to accompany something like AB 1400 and the legislation. They go hand in hand. And I think how we do that is we not only beat back a Republican recall of the governor, but I think we also invest in the statewide infrastructure that focuses not just on electing Democrats at the state, federal, and local levels, even in red parts of the state, but we also focus that energy around helping these progressive policies become reality. I think it is the organizing work that is required. In the previous question, I laid out what that looked like. No sense in rehashing that, but the same kind of infrastructure we have in the election season is the same kind of infrastructure I would hope to have on a year-round basis to support things like AB 1400.
Great. The next question we have from Guillermo Gonzalez, and it's to both candidates, and it is, what specific plan do you have for winning back congressional seats we lost last election? Let's start with Ms. Easton.
Well, I do think it's about getting the party more nimble and more boots on the ground from the party. In 2018, when we took 7 congressional seats away from Republicans, we had more actual Democratic Party people. We hadn't contracted out as many of the services as we did in the last election. So it's getting more boots on the ground. Part of that is, they come out of the headquarters, but more than that, it's about going out and doing the sort of training we've both been talking about, to train people locally to take a bigger role in electing Democrats up and down the state. But certainly those 4 seats that we just lost, as well as some others, I'm very convinced that it would be heaven on earth if we could get rid of Tom McClintock and some other people that are just knuckle draggers. And McClintock is especially annoying, though, because when I was in the legislature with him, he was in Thousand Oaks. He wasn't even in the Sierras. But guess what? He doesn't live in the Sierras now. He just represents them. He lives in Oak Grove. He's never lived in his district. The fact is that it's just embarrassing that someone who doesn't live in their district should be allowed to serve all these years. But more importantly, it's about getting a lot more nimble about training people hither, thither, and yon, up and down the state, east, west, north, south, get a lot more people ready to help working, yes, in local nonpartisan races and all the way up the line.
Mr. Hicks?
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, the question is, what specific plan do you have for winning back the congressional seats we lost in the last election?
Gotcha. Well, first, I think we have to see what opportunities redistricting brings us. The deck is getting reshuffled a bit, and some seats will get easier, some seats will get harder. Obviously, the D-Trip has just outlined the seats that are their targeted seats, which are the 4 that we came up short in 2020. I think we also have to recognize that there were unique challenges in each one of those seats and adapt our programming to those unique challenges. In the 21st, the seat was lost in Kern County in many ways due to some election protection, voter protection efforts. In the 25th, it was no party preference voters. In the 39th and the 48th, it was really around the AAPI community that had an outsized impact in the success of those seats. And in the 39th, in the Cisneros seat and the Christy Smith's seat, you actually saw a larger number of crossover voters, voters that would vote for Joe Biden and then would vote for the Republican candidate for Congress. We've got to not just wait for redistricting to come around to begin to do the organizing work, but I think the regional infrastructure that we can put in place is going to support purple and red parts of the state to put us in the best possible position to win those seats back. I said it a couple questions ago, I'll say it again. Some would see the recall as something we don't want to have, and I agree. I prefer not to have it, but it is an opportunity to put in place the infrastructure that we will need in 2022. We stood up a statewide coordinated campaign this party had not had in the better part of 2 decades in the middle of a global pandemic. We were only able to put that up in January of 2020. We've got the opportunity to put that in place much, much earlier, get people trained, get in position, and also get on the doors, which we weren't able to do in 2020.
All right, thank you. So this next question is from Leroy Martinez, and they want to know about, in terms of justice and police reform, where are your stances, especially with recent laws of like no chokeholds and county supervisors oversight with the sheriff's department at the county level? Where do you all stand within this?
Well, first I would say that I think that obviously in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, we did see the legislature come together and make some progress. I would argue some modest progress on an incredibly important issue. Obviously, you have the chair of the Black Legislative Caucus, the Legislative Black Caucus, stepping forward with the pro tem and putting forward some additional reforms into a bill package that I'm hoping we will see passed and signed. But obviously, you see local municipalities around the country stepping forward on this issue when state legislatures don't. You know, you saw New York actually step forward and end qualified immunity for officers. You've got a progressive DA in Los Angeles that is making taking some significant steps forward to make some real change and having some headwind as a result of it. But I think he is pushing through despite the challenges that it takes in order to make that happen. So I think we've made some progress. I think there's a lot more to be done.
Thank you, Delaine.
I am inclined to agree. I think we have shined the light at last on some pretty dark corners of public policy as it relates to policing. There's just been too much leeway given, and too many people have seen their rights, especially people of color, have seen their rights trampled on. And so I think we are moving in the right direction. I think the current trial, having so many people saying, no, that isn't the way he was trained. That isn't the solution to a person who's behaving in a less than perfect way. He never should have had his knee on his neck. And so, but I think we in general have to figure out how to do much more to help kids before they get into deep yogurt, much less policing at schools, much less policing in areas that are more family oriented and more, yes, counseling, yes, advising, yes, people that will in fact stop situations from boiling over. But beyond that, we also then have to move ahead with better appropriate training of how we do things, even as police. There are many places on earth where people aren't as weaponized as our police are here, and where the role of the police is much more respectful and commendable in terms of reducing the tensions that exist when things go wrong. And so let us find a way to improve the training and the counseling and the guidance that we give to those who defend us, who are police officers and are in the sheriff's departments and so forth. But let's also then find the room for people that don't necessarily carry weapons to give our young and our old and everybody in between more of an opportunity to, de-emphasize the anger and the hurt that so often go with temper tantrums, and become more able to substitute much better solutions to our challenges.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to try and squeeze in a couple more. So this one comes from Ken and Catherine Cameron and is to both candidates. So they asked, there are hundreds of grassroots progressive efforts going on in California, such as Swing Left, Flip the West, etc. All of this energy is going on outside of the party, which is often viewed as ineffective. What can you do to harness and legally coordinate with these groups and magnify the power of all this energy? Ms. Easton, we'll have you answer that one first.
Well, I think there's room for us to partner with a lot of different entities and organizations. Environmentally, there are organizations we should work with. In terms of civil rights and civil liberties, there are organizations we should be working with. In terms of children and child development and child care, there are organizations that we can and should be working with more effectively. And in terms of seniors, so many more options that we have not really explored. We have a lot of talented people, but they, for whatever reasons, they can't go out precinct walking, but they have energy and time and intelligence and beautiful vocal experiences that they can share with us. So let's be more nimble about building the teams that we need, whether it's teams to go precinct knocking, for teams to go telephoning, or teams to go help get people to phone bank or whatever else it is. At the end of the day, I really do believe that this party has great potential to embrace and to partner with some organizations that aren't necessarily calling themselves democratic and organizations, but do in fact share our values. And we have to have the courage, though, to be willing to forge those partnerships. And that's why it's appropriate that Courage California would ask that question.
Well, I appreciate the question, and there's a reason why there's Swing Left and Indivisible and a host of grassroots organizations that popped up, especially after the 2016 election, frankly, because the party wasn't doing this work. And so, for the first time in 2020, a statewide coordinated campaign with 25 organizers across the state sought to coordinate with every single one of those organizations doing work in battleground districts and swing counties in California. There's a reason why we engaged 57,000 volunteers, many of whom, are a part of those organizations and also engage with the party as well. And so I think those are the kinds of you really only get to know someone when you're in the trenches with them, when you are in a scrap together. And in 2020, we had the opportunity to do that. There was some great, relationships, but organizational relationships that were forged in 2020. And I think we've got the opportunity to continue to build upon them in the future. And there's an opportunity to legally coordinate on much of this. We have to be thoughtful as to how we do it. I remember when I told people that we were going to stand up a statewide coordinated campaign, they were like, it's too expensive and it's too complicated to do. Well, we proved that you can do both. You can raise the resources to be able to do it, and you can find a legally appropriate way to make it happen. And my hope is we can do even more going forward.
Thanks so much. Irene, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, let's go ahead with one last question.
Okay. Thank you everyone for your patience and our technical difficulties beginning. We're gonna get through this. All right, so this last question resonates, that I would say, with courage. This is from Carlos to both of you. We have the 5th largest economy in the world, and most Californians support progressive policies like Medicare for All, raising the minimum wage, and the Green New Deal. We have a Democrat governor, a majority of Democrats in the Assembly and the Senate. Yet we can't get progressive policies pushed forward and passed. What will you do to actively and visibly get our legislators to work for us and not big corporate donors? We can start with Rusty.
Well, I over the course of the last hour plus, I think I've probably mentioned this 2 or 3 times. I think it's to remind us who has the power. I think oftentimes we help to elect great candidates at the state, federal, and local level. And then we say, wow, we did our job. Well, we deal in, by doing so, we cede our power to, and we deal in a flawed product. We deal in human beings who will both surprise us, inspire us, and occasionally disappoint us. In order to ensure that we protect ourselves from that, we have to organize across the state. The power is not in the chair of the party. The power is not in delegates to the party. The power is not in the 150 something elected officials at the state and federal level here in California, held by one party or the other. The power is in 10 million Democrats across the state, in 22 million voters across the state. We have to remind ourselves that our work has to be connected to the lived experiences of Californians, and we have to ensure that we're organizing them and bring that power to bear, whether it's in City Hall or in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C., or wherever it might be. I think connecting our platform to our elected officials, to the lived experiences of 40 million Californians, is how we have the greatest impact for all of us.
Thank you, Rusty. And Delaine can finish us off with this question.
Well, a few years before Barack Obama taught community organizing, I taught community organizing. We use the same textbook, though. We both use Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. And in it, Alinsky says there are 2 sources of power in the universe. One is money, and the other is people. But people are only powerful when they're organized. And so that's what we have to do. We have to organize, not just before the election, but after the election. We've got to remind the people that were elected what the platform is that they stood on when they were running, what the issues were they committed to when they were candidates, and what the future of California requires. The fact is, there's another wonderful story about Franklin Roosevelt. Some people came in and lobbied him about something they wanted him to do. He says, I agree with everything you've said. Now go out there and put some pressure on me to do it. So it may be that we as the Democratic Party have to go out there and put some pressure on some of the people we've elected to do these things. I am just horrified that we're still fracking in California. And I cannot understand. I don't know any subject on which more people agree. And I even know Republicans that think fracking is really stupid. Because in fact, we had earthquakes before they were fashionable. We shouldn't be fracking in California. We should be working on clean forms of energy and a future that's delicious for our kids, that includes really healthy decisions that we make about tomorrow. And I pledge to you that when I'm chair, we will, in fact, go out there and put some pressure on people to do the right things.
Thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to Raquel.
That is all the time we have tonight for questions. I wanted to thank you both, Delaine and Rusty, for being here and answering our questions. And then I want to thank everyone who submitted a question. And I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to everyone's question, but try to get through as much as possible. And I'm also very excited and very glad to see so much interest in the leadership of the Democratic Party. And now I want to give both Rusty and Delaine 1 minute each to speak directly to the audience about why they should be the chair of the California Democratic Party. So let's start with Delaine.
Well, I want to thank you, courageous Californians, for inviting me here and for being just exactly who you are. The party I lead will reflect our democratic values, not only in its platform, but in the ways we raise money to fund our work and the way decisions are made. We will be the party championing living wages, workers' rights, campaign finance reform, environmental justice, social justice, and Medicare for all. And of course, we will make education a priority as the state of California Constitution says that it should be. We'll engage everybody in California who shares our values as inspired to translate those values into action. I commit to building a party where courage is fashionable, vision is palpable, compassion and caring are the norm. So if you want to take the time to create a better California Democratic Party, I invite you to join our efforts. Please see our chat for ways to get involved, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Delaine. Rusty?
Well, first, thank you to Courage California for bringing us all together, and to those of you who have been watching and submitting your questions and commenting. Thank you for your participation and your interest in the leadership of our party. I've been incredibly proud of the work that we've been able to do over the last 18 months or so. There's been some good work that's been done. There's certainly a lot more to do, and I'm working hard to earn the opportunity to continue to do it. If you're a delegate, I'd be grateful to have your vote and to have your support. You have until April the 21st to cast a ballot. But also for those of you who aren't delegates of our party, I look forward to collaborating with you to ensure that we build a California that works for all of us. If you want more information, feel free to give me a call at 213-399-8872, 213-399-8872, or go to rustyhicks.org. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rusty and Elaine, for joining us tonight to share your vision for the party. I wish you both the best in this important race. I also want to take this moment really to thank all of you, Courage members and partners and delegates of the party, for joining us tonight on this forum. As I predicted, lots of opinions popped up in here, which is great because I think this is what makes our democracy stronger here in California. I want to encourage those of you who are not delegates who joined us to remember to continue to register to vote in these sorts of elections. I also encourage you, if you heard something that you liked or something that inspired you or something that frustrated you that you want to see changed, I hope you also consider running for a delegate for the party, because we need as much representation as possible that actually represents the whole of our state. As I mentioned, we need a strong and diverse democracy that reflects the demographics and values of all Californians. We need bold and grounded leaders who listen to and co-govern with all of our communities. So I hope you all continue to make your voices heard at the ballot box, your city halls, in the Capitol, and in your neighborhoods. For this chair election, I encourage you to find out who your party delegates are and let them know what your priorities are and who you'd like to see as the party chair. If you have any more questions about this forum or for Courage, please send us an email at info@couragecampaign.org. In a couple of months, I hope you come back, as Courage California is planning and hoping to host a town hall with party chair in the early summer. With Courage, we can fight for a representative democracy that works for all Californians. Thank you again, and good night, and appreciate your patience through all of our technical issues. We hope to see you back again soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.